Okay. Hi, Sandy. How are you?
Hi, I'm delighted to be here. I'm great.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Your bio I read through, and I think it's going to be a good interview because you're going to have to do a lot of explaining of things that I just didn't
Usually,
understand at all.
that's usually the case with me, so I'm practiced. That's no
You're
problem
used
at
to
all.
that, yeah? Okay. Well, right off the bat, let me just read the first sentence on your bio. It says Sandy Hart is an award winning leader in the fields of women's empowerment and interfaith community building. All right, explain what that is.
Well, for the last 20 years, I have been the founding president of S.A.R.A.H, the Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope. We're a women's interfaith organization that was spired after the events of 9/11, where I opened my front door and got out of the way after hearing the call, gather women, just as a response to the tension going on in our world and particularly our country that morning. And I did so, and we became the mothers of our community. And that's where the community building really found me, where it taught me how to be a servant in my community by locking arms with women of diverse faith traditions so that we could show up in our highest and our deepest value systems. And we hosted monthly gatherings, our Sarah circles. We did, I think, close to 200 of those in each other's living rooms and homes. We were called on by the university, various universities around our community, to provide panel discussions and participate in events. And we've hosted many events on campuses in different places around Orange County, California, where we got our start. And that's where our community building happened. And it all came through the Orange County Human Relations Commission, which was, our main thread out into the community, and just kept following the threads to the different programs that needed to happen, different ways to be creative and community building that hadn't been done before, especially on interfaith work. So, yeah, that's a lot to to sort of capture in a few sentences. But over the years, we have just listened carefully and responded spontaneously, and then when COVID hit, we went online, and now we're global.
Wow, okay. Give me an example of community building. Like what would you do as a task or a chore?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, anytime we bring our community together for reconciliation or understanding of one another, which was really what we designed our mission to be, again, we tried to be really creative. So, a couple of different things that we would do. One was a big award winner for us. Was We came up with the idea of I call it covert interfaith collaboration, where we're bringing people of different faiths together who normally wouldn't come together to have a conversation, because we realized we were doing so much preaching to the choir. I was so tired of people agreeing with me when I stood up at a podium with a room full of people, that I really wanted to touch the hearts of those who were still operating in fear of who our Muslim community was, fear of the other in general. And and so our covert way of doing that was through a weekend of community service. And we galvanized hundreds of people, about 1,000 people, closer to over 1,000 actually, people out to about 100 different service projects, where we sent them out to clean the beach. We did all of this on a weekend, for example, and we did this every year for 7 years. So they would go clean the beach, or paint the Boys and Girls Club, or work with an organization that fixed up homes for shut-ins. I mean, just a plethora of ways to serve in your community. And we designed it to cross-pollinate our community, and we saw some really amazing relationship building happening there. And community building is all about relationship building, and that's what we were, known to do in Orange County. And now we do it on a different scale. But anytime that you're creating harmony and understanding and a more safe community, through programs like our weekend of community service, or we would bring together, we worked with an organization, had this great center where they just gave us the space. And we did a number of different things where we brought together the community to sit in small dialogue circles to talk to one another with someone who was of notoriety, to come talk to them about whether it was the environment or our healthcare or any of the things that we were really, we all care about. We would have a speaker on that topic, and we would create the space for small group dialogue, because it really does happen one heart at a time, one relationship at a time. And there was one more that was really huge, and that was our work with the compassion movement, where we created cities of compassion, where now we're talking at a legislative level, and or the board of supervisors level, excuse me, where we're trying to, encourage compassion programming, compassion language, changing the narrative in our community. And that's also very grassroots too. So there's 3 really good examples for you.
Okay, well, that's super. And I like the idea that you're actually doing very practical things like cleaning the beach and painting. That's fantastic. Initially, I thought this was more of just a spiritual sort of meeting where you didn't actually get out there and get your hands dirty. But this is great. And let me ask you.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's both. That's really important too.
Okay,
really
so you do
important for
both.
us to come together at that level. Yeah.
Okay.
It's both.
Well, let me ask you something about that, because you mentioned interfaith. So I'm assuming that means the women can be from Christian backgrounds, from Muslim backgrounds, Buddhist, Jewish, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Non-believers.
Non-believers.
Yeah.
All right.
Wiccan. Sure.
Did you find any, I don't want to use the word animosity, but what was the first challenge that you found bringing all these different types of people together in one room and, purportedly for a common purpose?
Yeah, it was our very first meeting.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, and it was one of the most memorable experiences that it's the first one I always bring up when I'm asked. I didn't know anything about gathering women. I didn't know anything about where I was supposed to find the women. I mean, I just kept following yeses. So imagine I'm sitting in a room with 12 women, most of whom I knew from different faith traditions, but many I didn't know. There was something I was noticing from across the room while we're going around introducing ourselves and figuring out what are we going to do now that we're together. I had this call, but we didn't even know. I mean, I had an idea of a name we'd call ourselves, but really, I was really wanting to operate in horizontal leadership and shared leadership and circle principles, which is a whole nother show. So I noticed, though, from across the room that both of their knees, as we started going around talking, I noticed that their body language started to change, and then both of their knees were pointing in different directions. And Gada had her arms crossed and was looking in an opposite direction. And we come around now. We're going to talk about the women that we emulate in our community. It was just sort of an icebreaker sort of a thing, because you know a lot about a person when you know who they care about and who inspired them. So Gada, I beg your pardon, it was Dossie first, who started talking about her mother who had recently passed away, who told her this one fable that taught her one of her greatest, moral stories. And I noticed Gada kind of melting a little bit. And then she gets up and runs out of the room, and we all like, where did she go? She went to get a tissue. She comes back, sits down, and it turns out her story was of her mother, who had taught her a story of morality that sounded almost just like the story that Dossie told. And also her mother had also recently passed away. I don't know if I said that. And so right then in that moment, these two who were on opposing sides of a war, and I later came to find out that Dossie was actually in Gada's neighborhood in a tank in Lebanon during a conflict. And they must have sensed that automatically. Maybe it was with their dialects or what have you. And so here's a woman in Israel and a woman from Lebanon, both fighting against each other at one time in their homelands, sitting on my couch. And the wall came down. God later will say she described it as there was a wall between us that was as thick as could be, but now it's come down a little bit, so at least they could look over it and see the other. And if that's all we do with our work, was to just provide the space for people, women, well, anyone really, to recognize the humanity of the other and to start breaking down those walls, then what more could we ask for? And yeah, it's been beautiful.
I think that's fantastic, and I think actually on a broader scale, on a global scale, that probably should be the role of the United States, because that, we should really be teaching that to the rest of the world, or at least showing that to the rest of the world as an example. And if they come to America and move here, that through a group like yours, they can find common ground, which they may not have found had they had stayed, because the conflict would be too strong and it would be too close to their, too close to their reality.
Absolutely. It's happening. It's happening in places like Israel, in Palestine, actually. There's a women's group there that crosses the border in the dark of night, sometimes changing their dialect to meet, but it's life-threatening. It's difficult. Here, they could do it. To your point, we have a lot of work here to do too, in the same way, and not so much about faith, but across the board, whatever we're disagreeing about, whenever there's a divide, dialogue in a safe place is priceless.
The political divide is very bad in this country right now, and it's, between Americans who have been here for 10 generations. So that's a whole nother story. We've got just a couple of minutes left, and I want to touch on your book very quickly. Your book is called The Liminal Odyssey. You might want to define liminal, if you could do that quickly, please. And then
liminal means threshold.
Threshold. Okay.
Means threshold.
Can you give us about a 1-minute synopsis of your book?
Yeah, it's a book, it's a philosophy, and it's an adventure. And it's my real life stories that I never realized how meaningful they were until I stepped into the threshold of what was going on in each one of those experiences, and more stories unfolded. And so it's a weaving of these stories, at least 12 of them anyway, that are all anchored in a philosophy, a lesson, a skill, some science, some indigenous knowledge, all of which was given to me in most all cases, but a few, by the thought leader, by the scientist, by the indigenous elder grandmother who taught them to me directly. And so that's why it's an adventure, because it's a model for what we can do with our own lives.
Okay, so the book is kind of relevant to your organization, yeah? Did the book come out of your work with the organization?
I would have to say that my organization, S.A.R.A.H, and my interfaith work informed the book, but it started in 1982 at a no nukes rally with 100,000 people, where I started a movement, and I didn't have any intention to start a movement that day. I went to a music festival and no nukes rally. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's chapter 1. And my story of S.A.R.A.H is also a chapter, and there's where I refer to maiden mother crone wisdom. So every chapter has a different philosophy attached to it, but it's based in a real story.
Well, Sandy, we do have to wind this down. Unfortunately, our 15 minutes just kind of whipped right by. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have a website? And I know you said you had a promo code, so go ahead.
Yeah. The Liminal Odyssey is liminal, and I know that's a clunky word. I always get my M's and my N's confused. Liminalodyssey.com. And S.A.R.A.H, it can also be found at sarah4hope.org. And the promo, yeah. So if you are interested in buying the book, go to my website, liminalodyssey.com, and look for where you can buy the book on that website, and use the promo code Douglas for a discount, free shipping, and a little gift inside.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much. And it was nice meeting you. Best of luck. I appreciate the work you're doing